Okay, welcome back. So today we are going to be going through the images that we took at Canvas Church a couple days ago, and we'll just be going through and editing them. I'll be showing you a little bit of how I personally edit, and I really just encourage you to experiment with Lightroom, play around, figure out what works best for you, but I will share a couple tips and tricks along the way. So I'm going to start off today by just applying a preset that we have set up already. I'm probably going to go with the Canvas Stage 2021, yeah. So I'm going to apply this preset to all of the images I took, and this is not just a immediate fix, especially for the ones that were not taken on the stage. I'm going to have to do a lot of editing, but it's a good way to just have an even look across all of them, to have a preset set up. And if you're looking for more ways on how to build a preset, more trainings on Lightroom, I will be releasing more on this channel. There's also so many resources on YouTube, so just go out and explore and figure out how to build presets and what your editing style really is. But I do suggest it's really good to have a preset for different areas of your church. It's really helpful to have a continuous look on social media and represent your brand really well. Okay, so we start with some close-ups of the guitar. Let's check it out. These are pretty solid with just the preset. I don't know if there's a ton that I would do to them. We do run into a couple things here. So you will notice this exit sign over here. I will probably pull this photo into Photoshop and remove the exit sign. I don't think that this is something that will remove easily with our spot heal tool here. So for now, we're going to leave the exit sign. I'll bring down the exposure a little bit. I'm also going to throw this graduated filter across the light areas of the screen and just bring it down a little. You don't want to crank the exposure too low or else it is very noticeable. So I just bring it down a touch and then bring down the highlights quite a bit, just to soften this corner a little bit like that. And then when you decrease the exposure, it often increases your saturated look. And so sometimes I'll drop the exposure a tiny bit and then also drop the saturation a little bit. There we go. So that just helps, refocus a little bit on the drummer. This big black area over here, I could put a graduated filter going the other way and lighten, but the problem is that with the camera that I was using, it would probably create quite a bit of noise. So we're just going to trim it a little, maybe get that fan out of there actually, like that. There we go, nice third shot, maybe scoot it over. Sweet. Okay, so stage pictures a lot of times are very dark, and there's some that, like, if I really want to get this well exposed, I'm going to be cranking this thing really high, and you can see this just creates tons of noise in here. So instead of doing that, I'm going to give up on the color version of this picture, and I'm just going to go black and white with it. I really think that a lot of times a black and white picture is even more powerful anyway. So we're just gonna, a little bit more of that. And then I personally like the nice film look. And so when I'm editing my curves, I like to have a really soft curve so that these low end blacks are just deep grays more so. Ooh, this one, you know what? No, I don't like that black and white. We're gonna keep that color. But I'm going to push the warmth so we can get some little orange and blue contrasting colors. With pictures like this, it's better to just go stylistic, I think. This is not going to look good if I try to expose it correctly for her hand. I mean, it's going to be all the way up here. So I'm just going for something that's going to look cleaner. I really try to edit fairly real to life most of the time, but this time I'm going a little bit more drastic with my colors. But I am actually liking this photo quite a bit. A little bit of pink in there. Nice. I'm digging that. And I can see that our next one is the same, so I'm just going to copy and paste that here. Nice. And trim it up, get some framing. Pictures like this are great for graphics. And so if you are getting more detail shots, especially, I took this, if you missed the shooting video actually, you can check in. There's a link in the description, and you'll see the moment when I take this picture. I took this during practice, and so it's great to get on stage real up close during practice and get some more artsy pictures. These are great for graphic design, great for social media. your media team will love you if you do it. So this one, it's a little hard with our background here because our background is very blue. But if I were to edit for skin tone, I'm going to be leaving this right about there. And then I think what I'm going to do is do another graduated filter on this side. And then I'm going to pull up the shadows a little bit, pull up the exposure, and drop the saturation just a little. No, that affects the blue too much. I might just pull it towards blue like that. There we go. So that gives us this nice, it softens the darks over here. Wow, I'm pretty happy with that shot in general. If I was really nitpicky, I'd pull this into Photoshop and pull the papers out, but I'm okay with it the way it is, actually. Crop him into the middle. Maybe a touch more contrast just to make it interesting. And I think one thing I really focus on, whether it's weddings or church or anywhere, is I always want to edit for faces. And so I want the face to look good. I want skin tones to look good. Right now I'm juggling this kind of orangey red look that she has. And so I honestly, like, yes, I would love to have great background colors, but if I don't have good colors on their faces, it ruins the picture for me. So I'm just going to put that right about there, and I'm fairly happy with that. Maybe a touch more blue. There we go. I'm liking that look a lot, so I'm just going to copy it and paste it on the next one. We got a little bit of motion blur, so we're probably just going to call this one out. Something that I made a mistake of really early on is I would always drop these highlights to 0, and then if you pull the exposure too far down, you start to get these weird shadow marks on people's faces because the highlights are actually lower than the midtones. And so, especially with people who have a lighter skin tone, I would just suggest being gentle with this highlight meter, not pulling it down too far. Drop your overall exposure to make sure that their face isn't peaking, and then bring up the shadows to make up for it. Because that way you can still have a fairly bright picture, but not overexpose their face. I'm just going to pull this in to cut out the head of the guitar on the far left. Actually, a little bit further so I can center her. Okay, more drummer photos. We had a very exuberant drummer. He's great. Killer dude. You know what? I love the coloring when I crank this tent to green. That is not something I would normally do, but it's good to play around with things. This was not planned. I'm just discovering this. Because this photo is so colorized and interesting, I'm just going to go for it. I've also got the reflection down here of a Christmas tree reflecting off of the plastic drum cage, so we're all over the place. It's just up shadows, down highlights again for this gradient filter. And I talk about this quite a bit I talk about this for a moment in the shooting video, but make sure you know what the policy on kids' faces are before you start posting kids' faces on the internet. If you are the policymaker for your church, I've got a couple suggestions that I list in the description of the other video where I shoot all of these photos. Basic summary is our church has a list of kids that we won't be posting on the internet because of family circumstances or foster care or anything like that. And besides that, we are okay with posting kids' faces on the internet. And then I just go through and while I'm culling, I make sure not to include any pictures of those kids. That way I don't have to worry about it while I'm shooting. I just think about it afterwards while I'm editing. I'd love to hear what you guys think about our presets for our church and about anything that's going on in your church. And so if you want, just let me know in the comments. Tell me what you think. If you have any questions, I'd love to answer some questions in the comments about your church or editing or anything like that. So feel free to leave those there. Okay, so we are back in for our second set of worship. So I did some photography near the end of the first worship service and then the beginning of the second. And so you'll have some more worship photos here. Let's see. With these pictures, I'm just gonna, it's hard because this girl is very bright and she is very dark, and we want her to be the focus of the image. And so I can fix that two ways. I can either crop it out, but then I get a very close shot of her. I'm not a huge fan of that. So instead, I think I'm going to throw another one of our filters on here and just bring down exposure a little bit, but mostly bring down highlights just to kind of sink her into the background a little bit. Maybe even make her a little bit more blue because it's very warm over there on stage. And then I'm going to bring up the overall exposure a touch and then the shadows a bit more, like that. Kind of make our subject a little bit brighter. You just got to juggle the white balance settings, temperature and tint to make sure that we get to the right place. And I'm liking that right about there. And it is a tiny bit noisy because of how much I've had to turn up exposure, but it's honestly pretty good, pretty passable. We're going to bring this in just a smidgen so we can put her right on the third line. And that right there, that is a great hero style shot with her in the center. This would be awesome for social media. Moving forward, I encourage photographers to really try to get different shots of the message. It's not the most interesting thing to get pictures of a preacher preaching. It's not as fun as worship most of the time. But if you can try to get different angles, get some side shots, get the front, make sure he's on a third, in the center, all of those different variations, you can generally end up with something you really like at the end of the day. Something I'm going to do in this picture actually is I am going to remove this exit sign and some of the stuff on the wall. It's pretty distracting. So that's pretty easy to do in Lightroom. I'm just going to take my brush. I'm going to select heal. And I'm just going to draw over the exit sign and it should just pull from the wall. Boom, gone. Can't even tell where it is. Same with these alarms. I'm just going to do them one by one to make sure that it can find an area big enough to cover it. And you also make sure you get the shadows of the objects on the wall. Otherwise, it will not quite work. There's that. And then the fire alarm. And you can tell when you're zoomed in like this that there's something going on over here. So I could move this around and try to figure out a better spot for it. Like that. There we go. Now you've got a more empty wall. I feel like that's a lot more appealing to look at. This one, I really want to play with this one. I was excited when I took it because it's not going to be easy, but I think it might be really cool looking, especially if we crank this and then we throw it into black and white. Yes, I am liking the way this looks. Maybe something like that. It's not quite straight, like that. Very nice. Again, we run into the white drum cage. This time it's not on the edge, so I don't know if this filter is going to help as much. But we're still going to try it, especially bring down highlights and then desaturate a tiny bit like that. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with a peach color across it because that actually is the color of the lights at this moment. Maybe a touch of dehaze. Ooh, yes. That's nice, actually. I'd be careful when I get into the dehaze categories. When you start using dehaze and clarity, you can overkill very easily. So be careful with that. And again here, we're just going to change our white balance. We're just going to play around a little bit and see what her skin tone looks best under. I've seen a lot of people editing further green. I end up editing pretty neutral or slightly pink on the tint. And then I try to pull down the temperature because I think that the orange look on people's faces is not always the best. And something like that looks really nice. I'm really liking the way that looks. And if I were to get really nitpicky, I could, once again, Photoshop him out. But I'm not going to because a lot of these pictures are supposed to be just about what it is in the moment, not what the perfect situation is. So I'm just going to copy and pasting our settings here. And the settings that we're working with are just a little bit colder than the preset. And that helps a lot with this specific lighting cue because this was a very orange song. But I also don't want the background lights to get too white. And so I might come down here and resaturate orange a little bit and resaturate red. I feel like that gives us a little bit more of the back, maybe too much actually. Let's back off to like there. Just gives us a little bit more of the background color. It's always good to take yellow, just toss it both directions and see what it does. In this picture, I think I'm going to have yellow up a little bit more because you can see in the background, this changes the way that the lights hit the drapes. And so I want that to be more saturated like that. Okay, so this is the question that I see the most in groups, and the question I've gotten before was, how do you edit the light on the congregation to work to look natural instead of being orange or being blue or whatever color the stage light is? And there's two answers. One, I don't think you have to. I think you can totally just leave it the way it is. I think it's a good look sometimes. But if you really do want to make sure that your audience is skin color, we're going to do that right now. We're going to try to get them to that point. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put, once again, our filter like that. And I'm going to just change the color temperature to be substantially colder, like that. That's pretty much all the way. We're going to push our tint towards the pink end. And then I'm just going to extend this so that it's not as obvious of a transition. Something like that. So that this first face of the front row, these two people over here have a little bit different color, but they're not bad. This first face, we don't want to cut him out too much. So I'm going to put him like there in the filter so that we're still maintaining the color of our stage and of our congregation. And then the other thing I'm going to do with this picture, because I really like this one, I think I'll probably use it, is I am going to take off this exit sign. So I'm just going to use our healing brush, cover this up, and we'll see what Lightroom does with this. Not bad, except I totally missed a piece of the exit sign, so we're going to start that over. We're going to cover that up. And it'll grab the wall, and it should just heal it just fine. And if it doesn't heal it just fine, you can move where it takes it from, but you guys probably know that. And then I'm going to come up here and remove this projector in the same way. Grab this cord, and then this whole projector. And I don't think that this is absolutely necessary, but I'm really wanting this picture to turn out. I'm probably going to use this on social media, so... and then that one is a little bit more noticeable, so I might adjust where it's grabbing from. It's always safe to grab just from somewhere very close to where the object was, like that. There we go, and this picture is for sure going to end up on our social media soon. So, okay, and so we have reached the end of our editing session. Here's an example of a pretty drastic change. So this is our original picture, and this is after edits. So you can see we've softened it up quite a bit. We've changed our colors slightly to match what was maybe a little bit more real in the room. And that's pretty much it. So if you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. In the description, I'll be linking links to the previous video where I shot all of these. I also include a link to our Dropbox file, which has our child photo policy on it. So if you want to check that out, I mentioned that earlier in the video. I've also included a couple presets in the description below, so feel free to download those. They're free for you to use as they are or edit them. But I do just say, like, really try to make the photography at your church represent your church best. And so that's not going to look like the biggest churches around. It's not going to look like your mega church down the street, but it's going to look like whatever makes sense for your church. So edit in a way that will continue to further your church's mission. Thank you for joining me. Click on the subscribe button, like this video. If there's any specific videos you'd like to see about photography and church production, put it in the comments below. I'd love to produce more videos like this, and so I'm always looking for ideas, and we'll see you next time.